Advaita Gadadhara Sadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dandavat Pranam, devotees. So we'll go ahead and get our topic started because I will have to end on time today. Let me see. Okay, Shambhala Prabhu is not on yet. If he comes on later today, yesterday was his birthday, so we want to all wish him happy birthday, but we'll wait till he comes on if he's coming on. So today's topic was Bhakti being our only shelter. And the reason I thought to bring up this topic is because the mindset that a devotee should have is that in their daily life, as a pragmatic mental state, is that we are naturally going to be faced with challenges in the material world. It's just, sort of intrinsic to the material energy that the modes of nature are never stable. So in that condition of the instability of the functioning of the modes of nature, there'll be times when the mode of goodness will be prominent, times when the mode of passion will be prominent, times when the mode of goodness will be prominent, and all that sort of mixture of all of the modes revolving, oftentimes mixed with our karmic portfolio, creates situations that are difficult. Other times it creates situations that apparently are very pleasing. Still at other times it presents great enthusiasm for material life and getting something accomplished. At other times it makes for kind of almost depression, so to speak. So these vacillations in the consciousness are generally due to not having a sense of shelter. Just like if you take a piece of straw and you throw it into a body of water, then you'll see that the straw is just helplessly floating according to the current, waves, etc. of that body of water. So in the same way, the jivas, when they enter into the material world, and I don't mean an original case of entering the material world, because the Bada jivas in this world have been Bada jivas, means bound by the material energy from Anadikal, but the creation is cyclic. So there's a time after the life of Brahma when the creation is wound up, and then the creation is again started. So at that time, the creation process coming from Mahavishnu begins again. He glances at the material energy, and in his glance, there is the halo called Shambhu. That Shambhu becomes the embodiment of false egoism in the jiva, and the jivas are in that glance. And that halo becomes the embodiment of the principle of false ego in each of the jivas. The jivas then enter into the material energy. So this is externally manifest as the deity of the Shiva Lingam. Is there anybody who has not seen a Shiva Lingam? In case I have to describe it. Anybody has never seen a Shiva Lingam? Right? So the Shiva Lingam obviously has those two parts where it represents the lingam, which is the procreative organ of divinity, and then you have the yoni, which is the base, which represents the womb of the shadow of the Parashakti, means like Rama Devi in this case. If you look in Brahma Samhita, there are different names for Krishna Shakti. The topmost form of Krishna Shakti is obviously Srimati Radharani. But from Srimati Radharani, unlimited forms of Shakti manifest. All the different Purnamasi, Yogamaya, Lakshmi Devi, Sita, and Ram Lila, all the different manifestations of the feminine principle of Shakti, all have manifested from Radhika. The principle of the creation is that Mahavishnu, when he's lying on the causal ocean, he associates in what's called yoga nidra. Nidra means to sleep, but here it doesn't really indicate like sleeping in the mode of ignorance. It indicates he enters into a state in which he's associating with the energy called Rama Devi. Again, that's only an expansion of Radhika for the purpose of the creative function. Now, when he's associating with Rama Devi, the material arena, which is generated from the causal ocean, begins. So now, in the glance of the Lord, as I mentioned previously, Sadashiv appears, and the halo of that Sadashiv is the principle of Ahankar. It's called Shambhu. That Shambhu actually touches the material energy, which is a shadow of that Ramadevi. It's a shadow of that Ramadevi, just as the halo, Shambhu, is a shadow of the principle of Mahavishnu. So they come together as the Shiva Lingam, and that's how the Jivas enter into the world. So that's the creative process. But the Jivas have been in this cycle of creation, devastation from time without any beginning. So because the Jivas are going through this experience with the vacillation of the modes of nature and everything, they don't find a sense of shelter. So, but the Jiva, just like Brahma, the story of Brahma is very instructive, that when he first appeared on top of the lotus stem coming from the navel of Garbhodakshay Vishnu, who's the second expansion from Mahavishnu, then Brahma, with his own intelligence, tried to seek out his existence. In other words, he started searching that lotus stem to find out, who am I, what is this, where am I, etc. So we've mentioned in other classes that the use of one's own intelligence and the use of the ascending method of understanding reality will never bring one to the actual conclusion. So of course we know in the case of Brahma, while he was searching, then the Lord blessed him by allowing him to hear the syllables tapa, which means Saranagati. This is the real meaning. Of course, tapa also means tapasya, so there are many expanded definitions, but the central theme here was that he wanted Brahma to surrender, give up his independent search for reality, and allow through the cultivation of the process of bhakti for that reality to come into his heart, descending from the Lord himself, right? So the jivas do the same thing. We enter the world, and though we are caught like a piece of straw in those waves that I described earlier, we're constantly trying to adjust ourselves, search out the truth, try to figure everything out, and it will just never happen. And there's not really a choice, because shelter is a binary reality for the jiva. What I mean by that is you can either have shelter within the spiritual reality, the spiritual energy, or by default, you're in the material energy. There's not like a third place. There's not like a green room where you can make a decision. While I'm waiting to go on, I'll make a decision where I want to be, right? So it's just by default. Like when you get on a down escalator, you start going down automatically because the function of the down escalator starts going down. So now you can turn around and try to run back up, et cetera, but the very nature of the current there is going down. So in the same way, it's a binary thing. If you're on the up escalator or the down escalator, I'm using that same simile, is the same thing. Either you're in the material energy or you're situated in the spiritual energy. So we don't have an independent choice as to how we'll situate ourselves. It's only those two functions. So when you're in the material energy, the jiva is sheltered by the material energy, but because it is unnatural to the very essential nature of the jiva doesn't feel a sense of being sheltered. That's why we go through periods of frustration, anger, depression, anxiety, etc., because there's no sense of shelter, right? Because though we're in the material energy, and it's actually the shelter of the jivas, as long as they've not developed their spiritual understanding, their spiritual connection, you don't feel a sense of shelter here. You feel a sense of anxiety, frustration, etc., because the material energy is not the real shelter of the soul itself. You understand? But there's no alternative, right? Krishna didn't give a third, well, let me just stand by for a little while, check everything out, then let me see what's going to happen, right? If you're not in the spiritual reality, you're bound to the material reality, right? Or not reality, rather, I should say. So the position of the jiva in the material arena has been described ontologically by Jiva Goswami in the very first Anuched. That Anuched is the same thing as chapter of the Bhakti Sandarbha. The reason is because Jiva Goswami, he wanted to establish the jiva getting an understanding of what their position is in order to realize the necessity to take shelter of the process of bhakti, leading to the absolute shelter of realization in bhakti, which is pure love of God, right? So I'm describing from the verse Paramatma Vaibhava Gunane Cha Tatasta Shakti Rupanam. So Paramatma here refers to the book Paramatma Sandarbha. So Jiva Goswami in that book, he was describing the nature of the supersoul, right? The feature of Krishna in everyone's heart. Sometimes it's also called Antaryami, Paramatma, etc. So in Paramatma Sandarbha, he was describing that feature of Krishna that's in everyone's heart. While he was describing that, he mentions here, Tatashta Shakti Rupanam. I also described the Bada Jivas or Tatashta Jivas. Is there anyone who does not know what the word Tatashta means? Okay, Prabhuji. So the word Tatashta means marginal. It means someone whose consciousness is situated in a borderline position in which you can be influenced either by material energy or by spiritual energy. So that is called tata sta. The word tata means like a line of demarcation, and sta means to be situated. So the consciousness is situated on that sort of borderline between the spiritual and material energies. So that's called tatashta. So he mentions, I'm speaking now about those tatashta jivas, those who are situated on that marginal position where they can be either influenced by the material energy or the spiritual energy. Because the position of the jivas I mentioned earlier is a nadi, right? It's an ontological description, not a historical one. And that's very important to remember, because sometimes what becomes confusing is that we are used to, in the material world, seeing things through the prism of past, present, and future. So when you describe the jivas being in this world, naturally our mind looks for a history of how they came here. You understand? So we start looking, well, what happened? Why did I come here? When did I come here, etc. But actually, the Tatashta Jivas, that Shakti of Bhagavan, which is Tatashta, permanently has that feature of being able to be influenced by the material energy until they're imbued with spiritual energy, which then makes them impervious to the influence of material energy. Let me repeat it. From time without any beginning and for no cause, there is no causal history to the jivas being in the material world. And I've explained that on other classes. It's not an inherent sin, fault, mistake, or rebellion or something in the jiva that caused them to be in the material energy. The material energy is, who does the material energy also belong to? Who's material? Yes, Prabhu, I can see it. It also belongs to Krishna. It's not something that's independent or has its own identity separate from Krishna. It's also Krishna's energy. He's described it, Bhumya Pauna Lovayu Kamana Burevacha Hankarityame, Bina Prakriti Ashtada. So he says this is Bina Prakriti means it's an energy which I've separated from the spiritual energy for my own purposes. So it's not that it's a separate energy. It's like the Christian theology of a devil and God and their competitors, or one has antagonism towards the other. So it's not like that. This is also the energy of God. So the jivas who were situated here, there was no history, no original causation, no fault, no sin, etc. Right? Now, sometimes as a narrative, and I'm going to repeat this, I've repeated it many times, when our acharyas speak, they speak according to narrative, which is simply a way to try to illuminate a particular point of philosophy that may be difficult to understand. They speak in ontology, like Jiva Goswami is here. They speak in actual histories, which are literal histories of something that happened. And they speak in Siddhanta, means philosophical conclusions. And in those philosophical conclusions, there's two divisions, one according to rasa, or according to the moods of love, and one according to just philosophy itself. It's called Tattvagata Vichar, right? So now, ontologically, Jiva Goswami says he's describing those Tatashta Jivas. He says they are Chit Ekarasanam. The word Ekarasana means they're neutral. So it's just a fancy way of saying that they're neutral, which means they've not developed a particular disposition of loving God. At the same time, they don't have a particular inclination towards material energy. They're Chit Ekarasanam. You understand? But as I mentioned in the beginning of class, there's only two arrangements. There's not a third arrangement. So in other words, if I have a neutral disposition, because that's the very meaning of Tatashta, shouldn't there be like a third place I can make up my mind? And Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Jaiva Dharma, he's doing a narrative to describe Tatashta. He does a narrative saying the jivas are just like a fish in a lake, and they swim from one bank of the lake to the other. So when you read that, if you don't understand the nature of narratives, you'll think, actually, we were like that. We were in between the spiritual and material worlds, and we were trying to make a choice. But that's not the truth. You understand? That's just a narrative he was using to describe what the word tatashta swabhav means. Swabhav means the nature of being, borderline, in between the spiritual and material energies. So now he says, Chideka Rasanam, because the jiva is neutral. Now here's where we can understand that the material energy and the jiva's connection is without any beginning. Because he says, because of that neutral disposition, which means we don't have the energy that produces love of God. That's not inherent in the jiva. The energy that produces love of God, that's not inherent in the jiva. Does anybody know what that energy is called? The energy that produces love of God. When you become perfect, that energy will come into your consciousness.
Swarup Shakti.
Swarup Shakti. That's the spiritual energy. It comes into the consciousness of the jiva. It's from that Swarup Shakti that has different features. One is called Chit, one is called Ladini, and the other is called Sandini. The Chit feature, the Samvit feature, allows you to be aware of yourself and your relation to Krishna. The Ladini feature of that energy is what gives happiness in that relationship. And the Sandini feature is the spiritual substance on which all of that exists, like the spiritual abode, Vrindavan. The spiritual world is all composed of Sandini Shakti. So it's infallible, indestructible, etc., etc. It's not temporary, it's permanent, like that. So that energy, that's not present in the jiva. Actually, the original person who wrote the first commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam, his name is Sridhar Swami. So it's very ancient Vaishnav who wrote the commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam. So he was commenting on the Vishnu Puran, and there's a verse there that describes this Swarup Shakti. And in his commentary, he says, Natu Jiveshu, though this Swarup Shakti functions as a single energy in Bhagavan or in Krishna, that energy is Natu Jiveshu, is not in the jiva. You understand? So that means the jiva has to have that energy descend into their consciousness by the practice of bhakti for them to have full realization of what is God, what is their relationship, what is the spiritual world, etc. But in the meantime, because they avoid of that, then Jiva Goswami says, Chideka Rasanam api anadi parama tattva jnanam samsara bhava. So I'm going to explain this. So he says, now anadi, I've already explained, anadi means time without any beginning. Now I want to tell an interesting story is that I think it was maybe in the 80s, there were some devotees who were fairly competent in Sanskrit language, and they wanted to translate these Sandarbhas of Jiva Goswami. And when they came to translate the Tattva Sandarbha, which is the first of the Sandarbhas, they came across this word anadi. So the word literally means anadi. Adi means beginning, an means not. So it means no beginning, right? But because our Srila Prabhupada had translated this word anadi as time immemorial. Does anybody remember reading that in Srila Prabhupada's books? From time immemorial, right? If you look at Srila Prabhupada's books, you'll see that word a lot. Well, that's a reference to this word anadi. But in English parlance, time immemorial simply means a time in which I can't remember. You understand? So it doesn't indicate time without a beginning, just means I can't remember. So that became a point of contention and confusion because the actual word means, and Jiva Goswami describes it in Tattva Sandarbha as a time with no beginning whatsoever. So it ended up happening, just to finish the story, that those who were funding the writing of that Tattva Sandarbha pulled back and said, no, we won't translate it because people will become confused, right? So therefore, the Tattva Sandarbha and the Sandarbhas in general, didn't become translated into English until much later on. Now there's translations of them by several devotees into English language, etc. But they struggle with this word anadi. But in the Tattva Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami himself gave the definition of the word anadi. He said the word anadi means that which has no beginning, but it does have an end. So this is very interesting. He says something has no beginning, but it does have an end. So if the jivas are from anadikal, means time without beginning, void of Swarup Shakti, the spiritual energy, but he says this condition does come to an end, it means that by the process of bhakti, then actually that absence of Swarup Shakti, at some point through the practice of bhakti, when we become perfected, that ends the conditioned state of the jiva. You understand? And then he described another word, ananta. The word anta means end, and ananta means no end. Once the jiva has been imbued with Swarup Shakti, there is no end to their spiritual condition. So listen, this is a very important concept. Anadi means from time without beginning, we've been in conditioned life. That conditioned life will have to come to an end because the very nature of the soul is that it is a spiritual energy. So it cannot exist in perpetuity in material consciousness. It's not possible. Jiva Goswami writes a verse from the Padma Puran, Dasabhuti Harieva Nanyasha Eva Kadachana. The word Kadachana means like time. So you can't at any time in perpetuity be various iterations of karmic identities. This time I'm John Doe, next time I'll be Joe Blow, next time I'll be Sam Brown. There's no possibility that forever and ever you're just going to be different material identities, because the soul's nature is an eternal position in relation to God. So at some point that has to manifest. That's the meaning of Dasabhuti Harieva Nanyasha Eva Karachana. You cannot keep a material identity in perpetuity. So that's the meaning that a nadi will come to an end. And once you've developed your spiritual identity, it is ananta. It will never perish again. Okay? So he says, anadi paramatattva gyan. So here the word paratattva gyan means knowledge of your relationship with Krishna. That is paramattattva gyan, the knowledge of the absolute truth. Then he says interesting word here, which comes from one of these 6 philosophical schools of India. And this, I'm not going to go into that because it'll just be more confusing. But here he says, Anadi Paramatattva Jnanam Samsaraga Abhav. The word abhav means an absence of something. It means being void of something. So he's saying, from time without any beginning, that the Bada Jivas have been the abhav, means void of this Swarup Shakti. So this is a direct statement of Jiva Goswami to prove that point that Jivas don't have Swarup Shakti inherent in them, right? That they have been the abhav of Swarup Shakti. Then he says, Maya Avrita, no, let me see. Api Anadi Paramattva Jnanam Samsara Gabhav. I'm reading it in Devanagari, so you gotta be careful here. Anadi Paramattva Jnanam Samsara Gabhava Maya. Tad Vaimukya Tridaya Labdya. So the word Tad Vaimukya means as a result of that, not historically in a sequence, but just as a concomitant fact to not having Swarup Shakti, being void of it, Tad Vaimukya Tridaya Labdya, the jivas obtain a connection with the material energy. Is everybody following it? If you're not, stop me so I can make it clear. As a result of not being endowed with the spiritual energy, a natural consequence of that, he's saying, is tad vaimukya. Vaimukya means a person is facing the opposite way, for lack of a better word, from the spiritual energy and from Krishna. So it's like I'm looking in the other direction and I don't see the spiritual world of Krishna. That is called vaimukata, to be faced away. Unmuk means to be turned towards something. So he says, tad vaimukya Tridaya Labdya. Labdya means they've obtained a state of looking away from Krishna and the spiritual energy. Then he says, as a result of that, Tridaya Labdya, Maya avrita surupa jnanam. Even knowledge of their own nature becomes covered. Knowledge even of the fact that you're the soul is covered as a result of that. How? Sattva, rajas, tamane, maya, jade, pradone. It is covered by the three modes of material nature, sattva gun, rajagun, and tamogun. Those three modes of material nature, they cover the jiva's knowledge, even that I'm spirit, not matter. And covering the jiva along with the avidya shakti, means the ignorance potency, for lack of a better word, the jiva then, because you cannot be nothing, right? The avidya shakti gives the jiva an identity. It is called asmita. So let me explain what that means. Asmi means I am. Ita means a condition of thinking I am something other than a spirit soul who's the servant of Krishna. Everybody following so far? It's all okay? Good. So the ignorance power or potency gives the jiva this asmita. And because the identity that's acquired through ignorance is not the true identity, a duality arises. You understand? Because it's like schizophrenia. Right? Because you have an identity that's not really you, but the real you, you've forgotten it, or you're like in spiritual amnesia. So you're identifying with this other person, but intrinsically, your real nature is there. So it's like a schizophrenia. You understand? So he's saying that the three modes of material nature, the potency of avidya, right? And avidya has 5 features. So let me go through those. Avidya means the absence of spiritual knowledge. The result of that is asmita, a condition in which I think I'm something other than the servant of God. As a result of that, rag and dvesh arise. Rag and dvesh means a duality. And the 5th thing is called abhinavesh, which means the energy is so powerful that we can't self-extricate. You cannot get yourself out of it. Everybody knows about quicksand, right? And you know that if you get trapped in quicksand, the more you struggle to get out, what happens? The more you get pulled in. So by your own energy, you cannot extricate yourself from the feature of the material energy. This is explained in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. I think it's 22:10. Anadi avidya. So now he's describing this beginningless ignorance. Anadi avidya yuktasya. The jivas have been connected. Yukta means connected to it from time without any beginning. Anadi avidya yuktasya purushasya veda atmana. Even though Purusha here means the jiva is Veda Atma, right? They're actually spirit, right? They don't have knowledge of it because they're covered by ignorance, but Veda Atma means knowledge of their Atma is covered. As a result of that, Anadi Avijja Yuktasya Purushasya Veda Atmanam Swato na sambhavanti. Swato means yourself. Swato na, you cannot. Sambhavanti, effect a change on your own. Anya, it will have to come from another person. If you are stuck in quicksand and you can't extricate yourself from it, and the more you struggle, the more you go under, what is your recourse in that situation? What will you need? I'm asking.
Another person.
Another person. So then the verse says, so to free yourself from the ignorance, you need a person who's gyanatva, a person who's already freed from ignorance, not bound by ignorance. But that person has to be gyanada, means, da here means doya or mercy. They have to be compassionate. So not only do they have to be themselves free from the illusion, but they have to have the compassion to want to offer help to you. That's the hallmark quality of guru. That's why it's being described. Sadhu guru is being described as that person who can help extricate us from the material energy. So now he says, as a result of that, sattva rajas tamo maye jare pradane rachit atma bhavanam jivanam. So the jiva now, rachit atma, means they have completely become immersed in this illusion based on the 3 modes of material nature. As a result of that, samsara dukkam cha gyanapitam. They therefore become acquainted with the idea of suffering. So this is very interesting, because in the soul itself, is there any suffering? No. Now, separately, in the material energy, it's described, dukkhalyama sashvatam, that there's suffering there. But can we say that that suffering is intrinsic to the energy of God? The material energy itself is just suffering? No. Maya is not in her nature suffering. It's the combination of the jivas and Maya together that gives rise to the concept of suffering. Does everybody understand this? Bhagavan's energy itself, it's described, dukkhalyama sashvatam, it's temporary and miserable. But that's from the perspective of the jivas trying to interact with Maya for their enjoyment. That's what creates suffering. You understand? So the suffering's not in the material energy and the suffering's not in the jiva. It comes in the interaction between the two. Just like you can take two chemicals, right? I'm not a scientist here, but you take two chemicals and they're benign in and of themselves, but when you put them together, they can become incendiary, etc. You understand? So in the same way, when the jivas mix for the purpose of enjoyment separate from their spiritual reality with this material energy, when they mix together, that creates the mood called suffering. So he says, samsara dukkam cha ganapitam. And the jiva becomes aware of it and identifies with suffering. In the course of that suffering, they look for a reprieve, and therefore at times of reprieve, that is called happiness. You understand? Whenever there's a break from the suffering, it's labeled happiness. You understand? So after giving this idea of the condition of the jivas in an ontological way, then Jiva Goswami, he mentions, therefore, in the material world, the jivas can never find shelter because this is an ontological reality of being in the material world. That you cannot find shelter here. Just like I gave the example in the beginning, once you toss a stick into the body of water, that stick is at the mercy of the current and waves of that body of water. Now, if you put the stick, just as an experiment, if you fill up your sink, right? I've actually done these physical experiments from time to time to give a demonstration of something. Like I did that to demonstrate one time the nature of Swarup Shakti. So in this instance, if you fill up your sink and you take a small stick of any sort and you put it in that water, you'll see that the stick is going like this. But if you take your hand and put it on the stick, can you steady it and stop it from moving? Yes. When you put your hand on the stick, you can stop that movement because your control of the stick supersedes the control of the body of water that the stick is in. In the same way, when we actually have contact with real shelter, then that being tossed by the waves of the material energy and the modes of nature can be checked. So the first hand that reaches out to steady the jiva in this material world is the hand of faith offered by the sadhu. This is called Ado Shraddha. So it's all good so far? So the first steadiness, or the first hand of steadiness that's offered to the Bada Jiva to stop them from being tossed by the waves is called the hand of faith, Ado Shraddha, that comes from a sadhu. Once that hand of faith has been offered and the jiva takes it, they themselves now, right, have to be willing to be held by the hand of faith. This is where Saranagati or surrender comes in. Just as I told in the beginning, Brahma had to accept the acting on the what he heard, tapa. He himself had to voluntarily accept acting on that, because Bhagavan will not force anyone. I'm giving another example. In Sanatan Siksha, the teachings to Sanatan Goswami by Lord Chaitanya, he describes the process of receiving the seed of devotion. So first he says, Brahmanda Brahmati Kona Bhagavan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasade Poi Bhakti Lada Bij. By the mercy of Krishna, by the mercy of Guru, those jivas who are wandering, floating like I'm describing in the Brahmanandas, means in the universe of the material world, right? By the mercy of Krishna and Guru, they can receive the Bhakti Lata and Bij. So it says Bhakti Lata Bij is one word, but the Bij is the seed of devotion. That means faith. That faith gives rise to discrimination. Discrimination here means the time when whenever it was in your life that suddenly you said, wait a minute, there's got to be more than just birth, old age, disease, and death, go to work, come home, eat, sleep, and repeat. There's got to be more to this. And that's when you started turning towards an investigation of what alternatives there are to spiritual life. And because of your previous impressions in bhakti, you turn to the path of bhakti. And so it's very rare until your sukritis are very, very high to automatically come to the path of bhakti. So generally it means from the previous impressions in the previous life, when that discrimination arose in you to check out what else is there, you turn to the path of bhakti based on those previous impressions. Understand? So then Mahaprabhu told Sanatana Goswami, Malik kare se bijaropan. So here the word kare is very important. Malik means a gardener. So he says, Malik hana kare se bijaropan. You become a gardener and plant this seed of devotion in your heart. Shravanam kirtane jale kariye shekon. And then the process of bhakti will then water that seed and make it grow. And then he goes on to describe the unfoldment of the seeds, the need to protect it from offenses, the need to take care of it properly. And then you'll watch it grow and it'll actually break the material universe and grow all the way to the lotus feet of Krishna. So he's describing in a metaphorical way the unfoldment of the jiva. But a very essential part of this is Malikana Kari Se Bijaropan. Kari means we have to surrender. We have to be the ones who plant that seed. The guru gives the seed of devotion, but whose prerogative is it to plant it or not? The jiva. It's us. You understand? It's not that it's forced. The seed is given. Now we become the gardener. We choose when to plant that seed. What is the methodology of planting the seed? It is called saranagati, anakuyasya sankalpa, pratikuyasya vivajanam, etc. And the external manifestation of that, Guru Padasraya, Tasma Dikshari, Shikshanam, Vishwam Bena Guru Seva, etc. So these are the internal, external, and the process given by Rupa Goswami of manifesting saranagati, or the planting of the seed. Okay? So now, once that happens, that faith has a power. Once you start to surrender to the faith, it has a power. The faith in Sanskrit is called Shraddha. So it says Shraddha Anupayani Varajam Bhakti Unmukhi Chitta Vritti Visesh. So what's the power that's in faith? Remember I described being Vaimukh, turned away from God. The power in faith is that it turns the consciousness towards God. So now, just like if you have your back turned, or better still, a better example, if you have your curtains closed, right? And you have blackout curtains, even when the sun rises, you can't see it. But if you turn towards the window and you begin to open the curtains, gradually as the curtain gets wider and wider, the illumination coming from the sun starts to come in. That's why you're Vaimukh, because you're not opening those curtains. But once you become Unmukh, turn towards God, towards Bhakti, towards Krishna, those curtains start to part, and the illumination coming from the influence, not the Swarup Shakti itself, but from the influence of the spiritual energy, like sunshine, begins to come through those curtains. Now, the first illumination that happens is that it illuminates the need for guidance. That's the first thing that happens. When that happens, Krishna arranges for you to meet sadhu, right? Because the mati may arise also from accumulated piety, sukritis they're called, like hearing a Harinam party, taking prasadam. Because there are people sometimes who've gone to the temple even for some years and they took prasadam, everything, but they really didn't catch on to exactly what this is. But then they get into a conversation with a sadhu or something and the illumination starts to take place. You understand? So now, once you get to the point where your Shraddha brings you in contact with the sadhu, that faith is your currency, right? It's like a transcendental currency. It's described also. Shraddhavan Jan He, Bhakti Adhikari. Kanishta Majam Uttam, Shraddha Anusari. Your advancement in bhakti follows the course of your faith. You understand? Shraddha Anusari means Your bhakti development is following your faith. So once you meet the sadhu, now you take the faith that you initially had that gave rise to questioning the material energy and looking for the alternative. You deposit that faith in the sadhu. Understand? Once you deposit that faith in the sadhu, that relationship becomes sadhu sangha. Sangha means a connection. You understand? So now that faith, depositing of that faith in that person makes the relationship called sadhu sangha. The word sangha means samyak rupain anugaman. Let me explain it. Samyak in Sanskrit means completely. Anugaman means, the word anu means three things: to follow, to continuously follow, and to follow with humility. So these are the three meanings of the word anu. Gaman simply means to go. So it means to follow someone by actual activity. So this word gaman means it's not just following by a mental ideal. It's actually the physical following their behavior. So when you meet the sadhu then gives bhajan. You understand what is bhajan? Bhajan is the mood of service. But the word bhajan comes from the same root as the word bhakti. Bhaj datu iti sevayam. This word bhaj, the verbal root in Sanskrit is service, inspired by love. So bhaj datu iti sevayam. So bhajan means that the sadhu now is giving the knowledge of love of God. You have to act on that in order for that knowledge to translate into realization, which dissipates, right? Because the next step after bhajan is kriya. Kriya means your activities and the subsidizing of your activities by the kripa of Guru and Krishna. That's the meaning of the word kriya. So bhajan kriya, this is what it means. After that, if you practice according to the instructions of the bhajan, then the power inherent in your activity, which is subsidized by the influence of Swarup Shakti, removes anarthas. The word anartha means things that are not valuable or helpful to you in growing in bhakti. That may in your life manifest as people who are not favorable. It may manifest as activities not favorable. It will manifest as just mindsets that are not favorable. All of those things will be removed, and the installation of things that are favorable will replace them. You understand? So this is then called anartha nivritti, the removal of unwanted things. Then when those unwanted things are removed, the consciousness comes back to the state in which it can now, just like, I'm giving an example. When you're sick, and this is the example that Rupa Goswami gave, when you're sick with the disease called jaundice, everything tastes bitter, right? It's a disease of the liver. Everything tastes bitter. But one of the recommended cures is sugar candy. So he says by taking that sugar candy over and over again, right? Gradually, the disease is destroyed. But gradually what happens as the disease is destroyed? What happens to your taste buds? When they start to revive, you start tasting the sweetness of the sugar candy. You understand? So Rupa Goswami is giving this definition in Upadeshamrita, Nectar of Instruction. So now once your consciousness is steady and the anarthas are removed, like the disease is removed, now you're eligible that when you hear Harikatha, when you are in association of Sadhu Guru, when you're chanting your japa, when you're doing your mantras, then the taste which is inherent in those things starts to appear on the consciousness. This stage is called ruchi. It means that the stage at which you're able to taste the activities in bhakti. By tasting those activities, a natural disposition of not wanting the inferior taste that you previously were dealing with takes place. Just like for everybody who's on the Zoom right now, the idea of going to the club, getting a drink, and having a hamburger just is not going to happen. Hopefully. Please, Krishna. I'm begging. Right? It's not going to happen. You understand? It's because by the practice thus far, the installation of the taste of even the practice at whatever level has removed the taste for those kind of activities. You understand? So this is the stage called ruchi. Ruchi also will develop in micro increments. You understand? Until the point where ruchi becomes the ability to actually taste rasa inherent in Harinam, in Harikatha, etc., etc. At the point of being able to taste the rasa samadhi, means the ingredients of rasa in these practices, at that point, your desire for obtaining your goal becomes unquenchable. That stage is then called ashakti. I've explained these things before, but by reiteration, it sticks in. From the stage of ashakti, you become eligible on the transcendental waiting list for the descent of Swarup Shakti. You understand? Because you're at a stage where I cannot do anything else. So now you're saying, Tavai Vasmi, Na Jivami Toyavina. Radhika, I've given you my life. I'm only awaiting your mercy. You understand? And then, of course, Srimati Radharani, Krishna, very merciful, Mahaprabhu is very merciful. They will allow the descent of that spiritual energy, which is the actual shelter of the jiva, to enter into the consciousness. Sudha Sattva Viseshatma Prem Suryangsa Samyabha. It will come first as like a ray, just like a ray of sunshine. Once it comes as a ray of sunshine, Sudha Sattva Viseshatma Prem Suryangsa Samyabha, Ruchi Bis, that ruchi that you had, that taste that you had, ruchi bis, it melts away, masranya, any last vestiges of connection with the mental idea, I'm this material body, this material identity, etc. Now, because at that time that Bhav descends, you still are carrying an external body, that body now becomes infused, just like putting an iron in fire. And eventually the iron takes on the qualities of the fire that it's been placed in for a long time. The body becomes infused with spiritual energy, but it's still a material body. So what happens is now in your spiritual identity, even though it's appearing in two places, you're able to function with it. So now internally, your spiritual identity is clear. So seva sadika rupena siddha rupena chatrahi. Tad bhava lipsuna kara vraja lokanusarita. So internally, in the body which you've understood now, your spiritual identity, you follow an eternal associate in Vrindavan. Like Sri Raman Manjari, Sri Rup Manjari. If you're a cowherd boy, you'll follow under Subal, Sridham, like this. You understand? If you're in Vatsalya Rasa, you'd follow under the guidance of the servants of Mother Yashoda. You understand? So in this way, you'll practice internally in that realized form. Externally, you continue doing sadhan bhakti the same way you've been doing it. But now, when you begin your practice, your internal reality and your external practice synthesize. It means they become taratmic. So when you go to worship the deity, it's not a ritual anymore. Okay, let me get the bell, do the achaman, 4 times to the feet, 2 times to the, you understand? But your internal identity is informing your worship in the morning. So now you start singing, Mangala Shri Guru Gauda, Mangala Murati, Mangala Shri Radha Krishna, Jugala Puriti, Mangala Nishanta Lila, and your heart will take you into that space internally. You understand? So now there's a synthesis between external practice and internal reality.
What's the
That is
meaning of that?
ananta. That will never change. It will only grow. And once you give up this body, that body which you realized in the stage of Bhav will manifest in Prakat Braj, means the abode of Krishna, wherever it is in the universes, and you'll take birth from the womb of a gopi with that exact same body. Understand? So I will stop here to take some questions. And also, let me conclude first with one thing. This is the ultimate shelter of bhakti, which was the focus of our class. This is the place where you ultimately find shelter, right? First, you'll find shelter in the process. And then the ultimate shelter is the realization. I'm just going to give this right quickly as the last thing.
Write down the name of that song.
Yeah. So, that's the Mangalarti song. So anyway, but in Srimad Bhagavatam, you read the different categories of Srimad Bhagavatam. Atra sarga visagascha stana posna uttaya Manavata Ishanukata Niroda Mukti Asraya. The word Asraya means shelter. So Srimad Bhagavatam is the process of taking the jiva from the material energy through the process of bhakti, delivering them at the shelter of the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna, which were mentioned in the first verse of Bhagavatam. Understand? All right, questions. Virginia Nandan Prabhu, was that your question?
I was going to ask, what does that song mean? When you were singing that song, the Mangalarti song?
Very deep song. Mangala Shri Guru Gauda. Mangala means auspicious. When you awaken in the morning, right? Mangala Shri Guru Gauda. Then the auspicious forms of your Guru Dev. In Gaur Leela and in the Braj Leela. The auspicious forms of your Guru Dev and Sriman Mahaprabhu are seen. From the vision of your Guru Dev and your entrance into Gaur Leela, Mangala Shri Guru Gauda, Mangala Murati, Mangala Shri Radha Krishna Yugala Priti. You get darshan of the Yugal Priti, means Radha and Krishna, during Nisanta Lila. Nisanta Lila starts at 3:36 in the morning until 6 o'clock. That is called Nisanta Lila, or Brahma Muhurta, those hours. During that time, the servants of Radhika, they awaken Radha and Krishna. So, Mangala Nisanta Lila, Mangala Udaye, Mangala Arti Jage Bhakatare Doye. The Mangala Arti that we go to, this is actually what it is. It's not that I drug myself out of bed, took a shower, I got to go to Mangala Arti, I'll get kicked out of the temple. That's not Mangala Arti. Mangala Arti is this what I'm describing. Yeah? This song is written by Bhakti Pragan Kesha Goswami, Param Gurudev, and he's describing Nisant Leela in relationship to Mangala Arti. So Mangala Shri Guru Gauda means the awakening of Gurudev. Gurudev takes one into Gaur Leela. From Gaur Leela, one enters into the seva of Radha and Krishna. The same thing is manifest in the Guru Astakam if you read it carefully. Right? Samsara Dava Navalita Loka means one is coming out of samsara by the mercy of Shri Guru. Then what happens? Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nitya Gita. Guru takes you into the Leela of Mahaprabhu. What happens from there? Sri Vigrahara Dhana Nitya. You serve Radha and Krishna. You understand? So if we study deeply the practice, it's teaching us the process. Study the practice, it's teaching the process. The practice is the external thing. The process is what's happening internally to us that's making us come to the stage of realization.
Adigo. Thank you, Gurudev.
That it's in the short program?
Yeah, I did send it in the concise program.
Oh, okay.
Did I? I'm asking now. I think I did. If not, I may add some things. I believe I did. I put that in there because it's important meditation morning.
And
Yeah.
also they need to know the,
Yes.
remember the term, the,
My wife is
the.
mentioning some things.
They can go on YouTube and pull up, Mangala Arti.
Yeah, my wife's saying you can go on the YouTube and you can pull up the melody for the Mangala. I just sang it. The melody that we sing in the mornings in all the temples is called Jagarti. Jagarti is a particular melody. When I was in Vrindavan one year, I was with Ayendra Prabhu, and we went to one Vaishnav scholar who's also a musical scholar, and we were asking, why is this the melody that's sung? Sangsara Dava Navalida Loka. He said this melody is called Jagarti, and this is a unique melody that contains both the mood of separation and meeting at the same time. Because Radha and Krishna are together at that time, but their separation is pending. So the melody covers both of those moods. All right. So Virginia Nandan, it's okay?
Yeah. How do you spell Jagati, Prabhu?
Jagrati. J-A-G-R-A-T-I, Jagarti.
I'm putting it in the glossary.
And my wife is putting it in the glossary.
And that's the mood of Radha and Krishna
No,
coming together
Jagarti
and
is the
separation.
Jagarti is the name of the melody. It's the name of
The
that rock.
melody.
Okay.
Yeah. Sangsara Dava Navalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Gana, and all the morning songs are sung in that melody.
Oh, okay. Jai.
Mhm. All right, Gail Yashoda, then Devananda Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hi, Bo.
Well, before I start, right before you open up for questions, you said that this right here is our shelter, no?
Mm-hmm.
Which means the process of hearing.
No, the ultimate shelter is the realization of Radha and Krishna. One takes shelter of the process in pursuit of that absolute shelter. That's why I broke down the categories of Srimad Bhagavatam leading to Asraya, which means shelter. So the process itself is like a conduit that gives shelter from the turbulence of the material world. Once you surrender and take shelter of the process, then there's like a protective covering that comes over the devotee. And as long as they maintain attachment to that shelter, that's the shelter that is like the conduit for them to travel the path to the ultimate shelter of realization.
But that sounds like that shelter it looks like you were making a covering gesture with your hands.
Yes?
Is the 9 processes, no?
No. The shelter is Sadhu Guru and the mercy of Bhagavan. The process is like, sometimes you go to an airport and those automatic walkways. So you get on the walkway and
Yes.
you're walking, but the
Yeah.
thing is moving at the same time. So the process is like that. The process is giving inspiration by helping you to move. And you're also making an endeavor by walking. So that's what the process is. The shelter is Guru, Sadhu, and ultimately Mahaprabhu Radha Krishna.
Okay, so that horizontal escalator or elevator, that mechanical thing, that's the 9 processes you're saying.
Yes. So if you look at the simile that we're giving of the airport walkway that moves,
Yeah.
that's like the process.
And the
Now, what
shelter,
happens if you don't get on the walkway?
then you either move real slowly or you don't get anywhere.
Well, if you don't get on the walkway, nothing's happening.
No, I mean to say, because you can walk alongside it.
Yeah, you could, but then what happens is that it's a very tedious path.
That's what I'm saying. It's so
Yeah.
slow.
Yeah, and also very tedious. Yes, right. And
Yeah.
that simile only goes to a certain level
Okay.
because in the process of bhakti, they've only provided the moving walkway.
Okay. That's the catch. That's the catch.
That's unfortunately the process. Acharyas gave a process, and the process is the process.
Yeah. Okay. So
All right, let me take one more, and then I got to move on. I'll come back.
Okay. Yeah. One more is that when you were saying that because it is not our nature to be in this conditioned state of existence, we cannot stay here forever.
Right.
But it could be like trillions. It can seem like forever because it could be trillions of lifetimes, no?
It very well could be. But actually, this is one of the merciful things about Krishna. Savastraham Rini Sanivishto Matak Smriti Gyanam Opanam Cha Apohanam Cha. So Apohanam means forgetfulness. So by the mercy of Krishna, can you remember 3 lives ago on Thursday, the June 7th, what you were doing?
No, can't you remember yesterday?
Yeah, and so that's Krishna's mercy that even though it could be billions of lives, he doesn't allow the remembrance of that time period to have an effect on the jiva. So mercifully, he's given in each life here's a chance again. Don't worry about what happened before. Here's a wonderful chance again.
But what I don't understand is why is it that by our nature we can't stay here forever?
Because the soul's nature is incompatible with the material energy. And because the soul's nature is that it is a das of Krishna, that identity cannot be suppressed forever.
Yeah, that's why I don't understand. I mean, because if it has lasted this long.
You don't know how long it's lasted. How long have you been here? You kept a diary?
Anandi.
No,
Anadi.
simply means from time of the beginning. But
Yes.
what is that? When is that? What year did it start?
But it's a long time now.
Yeah, we could say long time just out of thing. But the point is that we cannot calculate all these things by our mind. That's the point that's being made. So it's not possible to try to figure it out how we could possibly not, as the Atma, be here. So Jiva Goswami is saying, because it is the inherent nature that we're the Das of Krishna, you cannot in perpetuity have other identities, or this would be the spiritual world. You understand? In other words, if you could perpetually have just one material identity after another eternally, then the material world would be just like the spiritual world.
Oh, because not only does it not have a beginning, but it also does not have an end.
The material world does have it in it. It comes
No,
back.
no, I know, but I'm
Yeah,
saying,
right.
I mean, what would make it like the spiritual world is the fact that it has
No
neither
end. Right. No beginning and no end.
and no
Exactly.
end. So,
Exactly.
and since this is not of that nature,
Right. So
then
therefore the soul cannot be in perpetuity connected to it in a genuine relationship. All right, let me go, Yashoda.
okay,
Bring
please come
Devananda.
back.
I
Please
am.
come.
I will.
Haribo, Dandava,
Haribo,
no,
Yashoda.
Haribo. So I have a question. It's not really related, but is related because I was just having a discussion the other day with Manini Radha, and I was, like, I know Mahamaya, helps to lead it, or she helps to lead us to Bhakti when we're ready, or like when we, you were talking earlier about like when the jiva turns towards, or when the light switch, the light comes on or something. And then I was just wondering about like, what is the combination of Mahamaya, material world energy, and the time of Kali Yuga with the devastation in society, the degradation of society, and does that play an influence in helping jivas turn towards, or I mean, it can, I suppose, but it could also turn you towards demonic energy. So I'm just wondering, do both of them play any kind of influence for the jiva to turn towards?
They can. But ultimately turning towards or away from Bhagavan is a feature of the jiva's minute independence. That I will turn towards Bhagavan or I will maintain my Vaimukata, means turned away from Bhagavan, is a choice that the jiva makes on a minute to minute basis. Now, if the jivas are not informed of the alternative and they're still in ignorance, is one thing. So therefore, sadhus are always roaming the world to try to give enlightenment, to show the light of an alternative. So that's one thing. Also, this Kali Yuga is very special because of the appearance of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So sometimes what is appearing to be the normal degradation of Kali Yuga seems to be enhanced because of the enhanced spiritual potentiality in this Kali Yuga. You understand? In other words, I'm just giving an example. If this is one place and this is another place, that distance seems to be, a certain distance, right? But if this hand was to go here, you can't really see how far it is now. Like from here to here, you're doing a measurement. Can you make that same measurement now? Not really accurately because you can't see the other hand. Similarly, it is inconceivable the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given in this Kali Yuga that a person can get Radha Dasyam in spite of the fact that it's Kali Yuga. So that makes the degradation seem that much worse because of the potentiality of the achievement that can be had in this age. You understand? You get the,
Wow.
you get the simile?
Say it one more time.
I'll say it one more time. So in any Kali Yuga, let's take this as Kali Yuga. The feature of degradation from Satya Yuga to Kali Yuga could look like this. You can kind of see. And actually Shastra says it decreases 25% in each age. From Satya Yuga to Dwapara Yuga to, Treta Yuga to Dwapara Yuga to Kali, right? Now, in this Kali Yuga where Mahaprabhu has appeared, because in other Satya Yugas, the full attainments of liberation, the four Purusharthas like wealth, sense gratification, liberation, etc., those are normally the goals. But in this Kali Yuga, Mahaprabhu has appeared. He's not only giving liberation, but he's giving pure love of God to the highest form, which is love of God in the service of Radha and Krishna Yuga. So I'm taking this goal, which would normally be Satya Yuga, it's here. You can't even measure the wonderful mercy of Mahaprabhu. You can't measure it because you don't have this metric now to look. It's inconceivable. So now, therefore, it makes, from that inconceivable point of view, the degradation of Kali Yuga look like this. Also immeasurable and intense. You understand? But
Yeah.
really, a lot of it has to do with the glory of the potentiality to develop the highest type of spiritual attainment. That's not there in every Kali Yuga.
Well, so we are so fortunate.
So fortunate.
I have one more question.
Quickly.
Auspiciousness. There's so
Mhm.
much the word auspiciousness. Can you just kind of like I mean, it seems like there's so much that goes into auspiciousness. Can you just define it?
Yeah, auspiciousness means when bhakti unmukhi sukritis take place. The word sukriti is a synonym for auspiciousness, Sanskrit word for auspiciousness. So when those activities, connections, whatever it might be, lead bhakti unmukhi to the turning of the jiva towards their ultimate welfare, which is spiritual reality, then it is truly called auspicious. To hit the lottery may appear to be auspicious, but how many people have hit the lottery and then had a horrible life? So it hasn't proven to truly be auspicious. But those who realize Bhagavan, it is eternally and forever and perfectly in perpetuity auspicious. Cheto Darpanamajanam Bhav Navani Nivarpanam Sreya Kairava Chandrikam. When the blossoming lotus of good fortune opens, it is permanent. All right. Did Devananda have a question or he was making a comment?
I do have a question. Haribo, Dave.
Yeah, and then Daniel after that. Go ahead, Devananda.
So I guess the first question that I have, it might sound kind of silly, but what does sadhu mean again?
Sadhu means, literally, there's a definition. Jiva Goswami is given. Sadnoti sadayati cha Krishna prem itti sadhu. That person who has understood the ultimate reality to be Krishna prem in the context of bhakti, that person is called a sadhu. Now,
Mm,
sadhu has generic meanings like a saint. It's the synonym of the English word saint.
okay.
So those who are doing spiritual life in any context can be called sadhu.
Okay.
But Jiva Goswami defined it in relation to bhakti because every person who's doing spiritual life cannot lead us to the path of Sudha Bhakti. So he
Mm,
said, Sadnoti sadayati cha Krishna prema itti sadhu. No, a lot of times when a definition to a word is given, itti means thus, or this is the meaning of this word.
okay.
So he's saying
Okay.
sadnoti sadayati cha. By saying the word sadhu, we mean to say that person who has realization of Krishna prema.
Mm. Then I did have I just want to kind of get a clarification on something. Because you know about the process. So when it comes down to the process, that faith is that main ingredient that you need to take because you may not understand like what Krishna is trying to take you, but by staying true to the process, eventually it gets revealed.
Yes, but in the process, there's accommodation for that. Like there's some religious traditions in which they're asking you to have faith alone. You
Mm,
understand? But in the process of bhakti, it's saying have faith in the sadhu and then hear harikatha. And the harikatha is the illumination that supports the faith and makes the faith a realization.
okay.
So the faith is not simply dependent on the emotional content invested in it. It is supported, nourished, and foundation by the realizations that make faith a reality in your consciousness. Because somebody
Okay.
could say, because just like we all had the experience a lot of times in our young church days, you're not asking questions to the pastor.
Right.
Pastor says something, that's what it is. It is what it is, right? So you're not going to be asking a lot of questions. Like they're not going to be raising their hand at the end of the sermon. Listen, I got a couple of questions I want to ask about. That's not happening in church. You understand?
Hmm.
Right? I have some doubts, Pastor. Right? Then you may
Yeah.
it's not happening. But the path of bhakti, the entire process is pariprishna. Pariprishna means questions. You understand?
Hmm.
And if you look at every description of that talks about Guru Tattva, Tasmat Gurum Papajeta, Jigyasho Shreyottamam, that the nature of the relationship is Jigyasho means asking questions. Shreya means spiritual questions, right? You don't want to ask the Guru Dev about stock market and this and that. But Shreya means relevant questions to your spiritual advancement, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, right, but that could be pragmatic questions. That may be questions about practical day-to-day life as well. You understand? But, Tadvidi Paripatena, Pariprishna Sevaya, one should surrender to Guru, and Pariprishna means to inquire about the absolute truth. So in Bhakti, the path is replete with the ability to nurture faith by giving realizations through Harikatha.
Mm-hmm.
Dainya?
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question about Saranagati,
Mm-hmm.
and you're describing how, in the process of Saranagati, we do things that are favorable and leave things that are unfavorable, broadly speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a helpful way to at least measure our own spiritual advancement.
Mm-hmm.
But given our entanglement with material energy, how much can we really trust that a self-assessment, and should the assessment really just come from Guru?
In the beginning, it should come from Guru, and then a sort of platform is built, just like when you're underwater, so to speak, right? There's a necessity of lifeguard or someone to dive down and to bring you to the surface. So when you're able to surface somewhat above the sea level, so to speak, in this particular analogy, and you have some perspective, it becomes easier to see being above water. Because one other feature about being submerged below water is that you can't experience anything, right? Like when you go underwater, it's like everything else becomes void. You could be sitting at a pool where there's like hundreds of people sitting around, but when you go underwater, how you get that feeling of like nothing is there. So that's sometimes what it's like when you're submerged in the material energy, right? You're unaware of things. So sometimes you can't even see what's favorable, what's unfavorable. They may appear even to be the same. So by the lifeguard that dives down and brings you to the surface, now you at least at a certain level of maturity have perspective to see what's going on around you. You understand? Because one of the things when you're underwater also, people could be standing over you plotting and all kind of stuff and you're unaware of it. But when you come to the surface, you can see somebody is doing this, somebody's doing that, and you're aware of the environment that's going on above the surface. So when you are able to rise a little bit above the water, which is the material energy, when you come out of the depths of that material energy a little bit, you can start to perceive even this person is not favorable for me. This activity is not favorable for me. This thing, and also then under guidance of Guru, you can temper how to deal with it. Just like when you become ill, whatever that dis-ease is not good for us, but there's a process for relieving it. It's not overnight, right? So we don't just say, okay, I have the flu and I don't want the flu, so tomorrow I'm not having the flu. So the recommendation is that you should take this particular antibiotic for a period of 5 or 6 days, whatever it might be. But you say, no, I don't want the flu. I'm going to take all 6 pills now. You understand? So the idea becomes there is an incremental thing. Just like I've never done it, but I had friends who used to do diving, with your with your tank on and the whole thing. And they say that when you do deep dive, and actually Madhusudan is on, and he used to do that, right? When you dive, there is a certain methodology for surfacing. You can't just turn around and come straight up. You get what's called the bends, right? Because there's a certain kind of thing that goes on with the air. Maybe if he's on, he can just give a little insight into it, and it causes cramps.
Decompression sickness, your body under the pressure, the gases come out. And if you come up too quickly, you'll get the bends. It's like if you take a soda and you put your thumb on it and you shake it up, if you remove it quickly, the gas comes out. The same thing in our body. The gases in our body are compressed when you go deep And when you come up, you have to come up slow. And we use the dive tables because we have stops to help us decompress.
So that's what it's like. So in the process of Bhakti, it's the same thing. It's a gradual growing, right? Rather than going like this. Now, a great deal depends on how deep you are in the material energy because of previous Bhakti samskars. So there are some people, their submersion in the material energy was here. Other people was here where you can't even see it, right? So obviously the person who's here, they'll have to gradually surface. The person who is here, it's not a great distance for them to get up above the surface level. You understand? So every single person's Bhakti samskars are individual. And Guru has to be able to gauge each disciple. That's why you cannot have a blanket program for every disciple or people. Every person's individual. And that's why you need individual connection with Guru. There's no blanket. Okay, everybody is neophyte. You understand? We can't account for what this person was in their previous life. So Guru has to be attentive. In the previous life, that person had come to a stage where now explaining to them Raganuga Bhakti will be helpful for them. Another person in their previous life, they had not come to a certain level yet. To explain Raganuga Bhakti to them as a practice at that point would be unhelpful. So this is why Guru-disciple relationships have to be heart-to-heart and personal. You understand? So that could be assessed and dealt with. You cannot have a situation where there's so many disciples. So now you have to put a kind of blanket policy there. Everybody's basically neophyte all the time. So don't come and ask me any questions about manjaris or any of that stuff because everybody's neophyte. Understand? So anyways, I don't want to get started on that. All right.
Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
Were you going to finish?
Yeah, I was just putting it down to make sure that was okay as an answer.
Yes, thank you, Gurudev.
All right. Oh, one more inquiry. Nadia, everything is good?
Nadia's very happy. She had a nice birthday and a great Christmas.
All righty. Life is successful.
She's a three-nager, but she's fine. Or not.
All right.
Hare Krishna. Dandavats, everyone. Dandavats Pranam. This is a great analogy because I was just thinking about the whole process of surrender and how surrendering really is the difference between really having the ability to absorb, to, descending of Sarup Shakti. And the analogy you gave was so perfect because being in the material world, it's like being underwater, especially in ignorance. You don't really know how to swim. You don't really know how to get out. You don't know how to come up. And so the spiritual master is there to actually help you, to throw you the rope, to help you come up. However, because I was actually drowning. And this is why I know this is such an excellent example. Even though the lifeguard had come into the water to save me, because I was in such ignorance and because I was so fearful, I was in such anxiety. I was just kicking and moving and just all over the place, right?
Yeah, and they'll tell you relax.
But it was only until I said, okay, I don't want to kill him. I don't want him to drown too. And so I just surrendered. I said, okay, just let me die. And at that moment, he was able to pull me out.
Yeah.
The same thing is with this whole process of surrendering. Until we can actually surrender to that person that's trying to help us, we're going to be stuck.
Very good.
So, Jai, good day. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, it was good. It was a good thing we had Madhusudan on the day because he was a lifeguard also.
Yeah, those are great analogies, especially the diving, because everybody is different when they come up of off gassing. That is such a great analogy of each individual of how fast or how quick you come up or exposed. And the same thing with when we're going to save someone. If they're fighting and kicking us, we're not going to let them drown us. We're going to push back and tell them to relax. I'm here to help you. And then we'll come in and help them. Very good. Excellent.
In other words, Bhakti is the process of dancing underwater without getting wet. You know what I mean?
Jai.
Wow. Wow.
Haribo. Gail?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Yeah. Well, I had a question from earlier, but now that you brought up this, you know, Guru does not give blanket instructions, right? Because it's individual. So, and I know you've explained this to me before, but I've forgotten. So then, why did Srila Prabhupada seem to have given blanket instructions?
He didn't.
Everybody 16 rounds.
No. Process is one thing. That process is blanket. The instructions for individuals' advancement, for instance, there are people who wrote to Srila Prabhupada, asked a certain question. He would give them an individual instruction to their adhikar. Somebody else writes the same question, he'll give them even a different answer based on their adhikar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but
the
the process
doesn't change, right? The particular instructions of how somebody's advancing in the process is individual. And the guru needs to be able to be attentive to each disciple so that he can gauge where they are in that advancement.
So, but I know you've also said that, you know, a guru will determine how many rounds each disciple should chant, no?
Here's a standard. The standard is 64 rounds. Srila Prabhupada, when he came to the West, he realized devotees would not be able to chant 64 rounds, so he said 32. They said he cannot, 25. Then he said a minimum of 16 rounds per day, right? But then he said, if you're chanting 16 rounds per day, he set up the temple program so that you were physically engaged for the rest of the day. In the early temple life, you could see devotees were up at 3:30, Mangal Arati, everything, and you chant your 16 rounds. Then you had service in the kitchen. Then you went on Sankirtan. Then you went on Harinam. Then you came back. It was time for Sundar Arati. After that, there was Bhagavad Gita class, hot milk, go to bed, wake up, and repeat. So Srila Prabhupada made the program so that what you were not doing in rounds, because you had no taste for Harinam at that time, you were doing in the form of Guru Seva and other physical activities. Now, as I mentioned, Guru will judge the sukriti of a particular aspiring devotee and say, listen, this person wants to come in parampara. My Gurudev has done it. So you begin, chant 4 rounds every day without fail. Right? Chant 4 rounds every day without fail. Then you'll try to increase. And gradually, depending on your adhikar, you'll come to the minimum of 16. If there's more advancement, you may chant more. But also, the chanting is quality, just not quantity. So a person can chant 1 lakh of Harinam, but 1 lakh of Harinam, if it turns into the ritual, then it's lost its content. 16 rounds of actual chanting is better. 1 nam of actual chanting is better than 64. You understand? But we want to try by chanting 64, because remember, at the time that 1 lakh was chanted, it was about absorption in bhajan life. So people weren't going to work this, and that, and what have you. Right? So 16 is a good minimum, especially if a person has been involved in bhakti for some time. But there are people who are just coming. And for them, the taste in chanting is not there, but they want to come in parampara, they want to do the process. Begin, you chant 4 rounds daily. Seriously. I had one disciple, they began the process like that, and now that disciple faithfully checks in daily. I've completed my 16 rounds, sometimes chanting more than that, 32 on Ekadasis or 20, right? Faithfully, they check in. That's that individual disciple. So I'm not asking everybody to write me a message every day about your rounds, all right? But that's a unique mood with that particular, every disciple, that's their particular mood. You understand that? Each person is an individual. And the relationship with Guru is individual. And what I was saying is you cannot create blanket arrangements, because when you have so many people and you can't keep up with the individuality, right? Because sometimes somebody's empowered. Our Srila Prabhupada was empowered to handle 10,000 disciples and be individual with them. My Gurudev had 1,000 disciples. He could be individual with each one of them. If you ask any disciple of Gurudev, they felt like, almost like in the Ras Leela, where each gopi thought Krishna was dancing with her alone. Every disciple thought, yeah, Gurudev has special attention for me. You understand? So this is an important thing. This is how Vishramba is developed.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens in those blanket arrangements is also the dominance of on reverence towards Guru becomes the standard, right? And in that on reverence, it shields the very nature of opening your heart.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So you can't really be honest and open your heart all the time. And especially, Guru doesn't have time to accommodate you personally. So listen, when you come to the Ishtagoshti, with 50 other people at that time, you can't really reveal your heart. So your questions stay generic. You definitely don't want to start asking about Manjari Bhav, because then Guru's going to be obliged in the atmosphere of 50 people to tell you, first get free from your not the body.
Yeah.
You understand?
Okay, Prabhu, thank you. I just had one other thing.
Sure.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. It's almost 12 o'clock, and
All right.
Bhakti has a question.
Who has?
Bhakti has a question. Bhakti Lata has a question.
Oh, it's in the chat? Okay, I'll ask you the last one before we leave. All right, Bhakti Lata, go ahead. What was the question?
Thank you.
Parvati, what was Bhakti Lata's question?
Bhakti.
Can you tell me more about the word Sakriti? I think I have the understanding, but Sakriti.
Sukriti is a very good question, actually. Sukriti, I explained before, it means, like in English, a pious deed. But pious deeds can have various categories, like you can give in charity to someone. You can plant trees to save the earth or something. These are all pious activities. But the acts in and of themselves, though they're pious, may not lead to realization of the soul. Because you can do pious activities and be expectant of a reward karmically for that. So it may not lead to realization of the soul. When pious activities are done in relation to bhakti, they're called bhakti unmukhi, means those things which turn your consciousness towards God. Sukriti, pious activities which turn you towards God, like giving donation to a sadhu or to the temple, or taking prasad, or hearing the Harinam party, or purchasing a book, or any of those kind of things. These are all kinds of Sukriti Pal. Even just hearing the Harinam party, it is Sukriti. Seeing a devotee with tilak, it is Sukriti. You understand? Because these are things that awaken the samskar, means an impression in your heart, which may be there from previous lives about bhakti. And that's how you became Bhakti Lata.
Thank you. Okay, I understand.
Previous Sukritis. All right, last question, Gail. Go ahead, last question, and then we'll do kirtan.
Yeah. Yeah, when you were explaining the 4 ways in which the acharyas speak, narrative, history, siddhanta, 2 of them sounded very similar, because one of the ways was through the philosophy of siddhanta, right? But then the last one you mentioned was, I think, tattva, which has 2 branches, right?
Nope.
One is rasa tattva.
Yeah, listen to it. I'll explain it. One way to speak as an acharya is a narrative. I'm going to give an example of each one. A narrative is what Narada Muni told to Maharaj Prachinabhari in Srimad Bhagavatam. He described an allegorical story of a person named Puranjana. So in Sanskrit, Pura means a place, like a city, and Jana means a person. So he was using the Sanskrit language, and he was giving an allegorical story of a person named Puranjana who lived in a city of 9 gates, which represent the senses and so forth, to explain to him about the nature of the soul. There is no actual history of a person named Puranjana, etc. It's just a narrative to elucidate what is the soul. Similarly, the same Narada Muni spoke the history of Jai and Vijay to Maharaj Yudhisthira, because Maharaj Yudhisthira asked, how is it possible that these servants of Vaikuntha could come to this world and become asuras? So then he narrates the history of the cursing by the 4 Kumaras and the whole history of Jai and Vijay. That's a history. Mahabharata is a history. Ramayana is a history. They're called itihasas. Then ontology is what I spoke today from Jiva Goswami. He's giving an ontology about the jiva. So that sequence of events, right? Paramatma Vaibhava Gonane Tatashta Shakti Rupanam Chireka Rasanam Anari Paramatatva Gyanam Samsarga Bhavama. That sequence didn't happen historically. It's an ontology describing how the jiva works, for lack of a better word.
Wait, what? I didn't get the sequence that you're talking.
He described that the Tatashta jivas, right, they have a neutral disposition because they're void of Swarup Shakti. Right? I told
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Because of that, they are void of Swarup Shakti. Paratattva means that Swarup Shakti, they don't have it. Samsarga above means they're in the cycle of samsara, and they have the above, the absence of Swarup Shakti. Therefore, they have a tendency to be Vaimukya, means turned away from God. When they turn away from God, the modes of nature cover even the knowledge of the fact that they're spirit soul, not the body. So this is a ontological definition of the conditioned jiva.
Okay.
Siddhanta is the last thing. That's the fourth thing. So we had history, narrative, history, ontology, Siddhanta. Siddhanta has two divisions. One is called Tattvagata Vichar. One is called Rasagata Vichar. So
Tattvagata Vichar.
Tattvagata Vichar, yes. So the word Vichar means the conception. Tattva means of absolute truth. So I'm giving the example. In Srimad Bhagavatam, the verse says, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. Is that a true statement or not?
Yes.
Okay. Now, that same supreme personality of Godhead, who has 6 qualities, Aishwarya, Samagrasa, etc., all opulence, power, etc., in Vrindavan, he can't even lift up the sandals of Nanda Maharaj.
Right.
He's all opulences, so he should at least be the fastest person that we know. But Mother Yashoda, with a sari on and bangles and everything else, tracked him down and tied him up. So is he the supreme personality of God in Rasa Gata Vichar? No.
No.
You understand? Like this. All right.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, Haribol here. All right, who's doing kirtan today?
I could do it, Mukunda.
All right, go ahead.
Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Dandavat pranam, Hari Bol.
Hari Bol. All right, next Sunday we should still be having class. Also,